Hello my dear friends and net aspirants, welcome back to High Point once again. So this is a place where you can get contents related to NTA, UGC, NET, JRF, English language and literature. So today's topic is Coleridge's Biographia Literaria. In the previous video we have seen Preface to Lyrical Ballads by William Wordsworth. So Coleridge and Wordsworth together came up with lyrical ballads, and also in the preface to lyrical ballads we have seen viewpoints and justifications of William Wordsworth about the poetry and the defenses that he made against the new kind of poetry that both of them have written. Here Coleridge, after that, he came up with some of his ideas related to literature, poetry, and he also mentions in Biographia Literaria that in which all points that he is deviating and he is disapproving Wordsworth's idea about poet and poetic language and the language of prose and verse or poetic creation. So in that way he also has created a poetical treatise. Coleridge also has produced a poetical treatise known as Biographia Literaria. We are going to see the major arguments in it by him in this video. Okay, so before beginning, if you are there in Instagram, you can follow me there. This is my ID, and I am sharing lot of free materials there in the form of study cards, reels, short videos, carousels, and daily quiz. In Instagram story you can attempt the quiz live, so that is a fascinating feature there. So, and also you can save all these things into your account, and whenever you want you can come back to them, instead coming to my account. Okay, so, and also if you want to join a WhatsApp group in which I am sharing news and updates related to NTA, UGC, NET, and also some study materials along with daily quiz question and answer, you can go to the description box and join the link and click the link and join the group. As well as if you want to have a comprehensible, simplified and well arranged study material for your UGC, NET, English language and literature preparations, then you can visit my website www.highpoint.in. Even if you are studying on your own, you can go to the website and see what we have provided there, how we are divided the indicative syllabus of NTA, UGC, NET, JRF, and how we have divided the entire syllabus into 10 subjects, and what all things we have provided there in each topic. So have the free trial and the free materials provided there. You can have also along with the PDF, along with the audios, you can have 300 PDF materials once you join for the course, which are downloadable absolutely, and also you can have the whole previous and practice set of question papers there which are live attemptable, and you can know your progress and mark once you submit your responses. After joining the course, either of them, if you are interested, then you will get 2 bonuses, and we are not charging anything for these 2 bonuses. First one is a weekly test in every Saturdays that we are conducting now, and also you will get a personalized study guideline according to your own schedules and your own preferences of topics to study. So if you are interested, let me know. You can WhatsApp me or call me in this number, or message me Instagram, or directly from the website too you can message me. Now let's have an introduction about the work by Coleridge, which is known as Biographia Literaria. So this is written by Samuel Taylor Coleridge in the year 1815. Okay, written in 1815. Remember this year, at least have an idea about it, because if something asked about the chronological order, then don't get perplexed. See, these kind of informations will be helpful in that kind of questions. What is the full title of this Biographia Literaria? Biographia Literaria, or Biographical Sketches of My Literary Life and Opinion. So this is the full title of Biographia Literaria. Biographia Literaria, or Biographical Sketches of My Literary Life and Opinions. And it is originally written as a preface to an edition of his poems. So just like Wordsworth has written preface to lyrical ballads, and it actually regarded as the manifesto of romantic movement in literature, the same way he also intended to publish this whole Biographia Literaria as a preface to one of the editions of his poems. But originally it was the intention, but later he published Biographia Literaria as a sole work, as a sole essay, as a single essay, since it is so lengthy. and it contains 24 chapters and divided into 2 sessions. So like like Lyrical Ballads has divided into 3 sessions, 3 parts. Here sum total you can see 24 chapters, and it is divided into 2 sessions. So if you could see, if you could see the whole chapters, there is no continuity between these chapters. Maybe in the first chapter he is discussing something, in the second chapter may not be the continuation of the first chapter, he must be discussing something else. We cannot find a well arranged plan in this work, but he has come up with many relevant and important points related to literature that we are learning today in this particular essay. The first session consists of 13 chapters presenting Coleridge's literary opinions. So in the first session, we can see in the first session consists of first 13 chapters, and there he presents Coleridge's literary opinions. And the second session contains chapters from 14 to 22, includes the extensive critique of Wordsworth work. So here mainly in the second session, which is from 14th chapter to 22nd chapter, here he mainly talks about merits and demerits of Wordsworth work. So he comes up with the defects of Wordsworth and his ideology, his theories of poetry, as well as he also praises Wordsworth for his genuine composition. And also towards the end of this video we will see it. So I'm not included each and every point here, because otherwise, if I do that, this is going to be a very lengthy video, but I'll discuss most of the important points here, especially Wordsworth, Wordsworth defects, and what are the praises that he is making about Wordsworth work. So that I have not included as typed letters in the as a slide in here, but we will definitely touch that. So don't skip the video, watch it full towards the end. I'll say that you cannot find it as a slide here, but I'll say that. Okay. So the last 2 chapters are on miscellaneous literary topics. So various kinds of literary topics are discussed in the last 2 chapters, chapter 23 and chapter 24. It contradicts and confirms 2 ideas put forward by William Wordsworth in a preface to Lyrical Ballads. So actually he mainly contradicts with many points that William Wordsworth has put forward in Lyrical Ballads, in preface to Lyrical Ballads, that we will see later. So let's see what are the major arguments that Coleridge as a literary person puts in here. Coleridge, in the beginning of the work itself, he acknowledges the influence of Christ Hospital schoolmaster James Boyer, the poetry of William Iles Bowles, and the companionship of Wordsworth on his series of literature. So throughout the work and in the beginning of the work itself, he acknowledges the influences, positive influences that he had from Christ Hospital schoolmaster James Boyer and the poetry of William Iles Bowles, and also companionship of Wordsworth on his series of literature. Even though he deviates many of the concepts and many of the theories laid by Wordsworth, he always appreciates Wordsworth as a literary person, as a great influence that he had in his literary career. Then after that, especially in chapter 13, I think, in chapter 13 he distinguishes between fancy and imagination, and he further divides imagination of 2 types. What are they? Primary and secondary imagination. So he mainly distinguishes between what is fancy and what is imagination, and while he was telling about imagination, he comes up with 2 types of imagination, primary and secondary imagination. Okay, so primary, what is imagination? Imagination is the primary very elementary capacity and talent of every human being. So what makes a human being different from any other creature in this world? So that is imagination. So that kind of an elementary quality of human being is imagination. Now he goes on talking about primary and secondary imagination. See, it's very difficult. I felt it very difficult to understand what is primary imagination and secondary imagination. It's very difficult to explain to. I find it that way. But I'll try my level best to explain this to you. So let's see what is primary imagination. So this is the quotation, this is the explanation and definition that he gives for primary imagination. So it's a living power and prime agent of all human perception, and as a repetition in the infinite mind of the eternal act of creation in the infinite I am. See, we all have a kind of idea about I am. What am I? So that from what we are getting that particular definition of ourself. It is from this primary living power and prime agent of human perception, which is known as primary imagination. So I got this idea that it's a living power. When we are living, and it's one of the prime and the very first agent of every other human perception. So we are living by perceiving something. We are living in a world of our own perceptions. So what kind of perceptions that we are having in our life, and who actually, what kind of quality make us, what kind of qualities make us capable enough to understand these human perceptions, that is primary imagination. So that primary imagination will make us capable enough to understand the infinite I am. Okay, so that is primary imagination. Take down notes, okay, otherwise you won't understand a word. So what is secondary imagination? Secondary imagination is an echo of the primary imagination. Primary imagination is the prime agent of every other human perception. It facilitates human perception, and secondary imagination is the echo of the primary imagination. It coexists with the conscious will. The only difference is its mode of operation. So secondary imagination is different from first primary imagination. Secondary imagination is different from primary imagination only on its mode of operation, how it operates within human being. So it's an echo. Secondary imagination is an echo of primary imagination, and it coexists with the conscious will. Okay, it's not that something that is there in the unconscious level of mind, but it is with the conscious will, and the working of secondary imagination is different from primary imagination. Now he defines fancy. Fancy is indeed no other than a mode of memory emancipated from the order of time and space, while it is blended with and modified by the empirical phenomenon of the will, which we express by the word choice or word choices. So fancy is that it's a kind of memory, it's a mode of memory which got emphasized or emancipated from the order of time and space. From our there is an order of time and space. We know that everything happening in time and space. So this order of time and space emancipated the memory, and that mode of memory which got emancipated from the order of time and space, that is fancy. And fancy is blended with and modified by the empirical phenomenon. What is empirical phenomenon? Empirical phenomena or knowledge means the knowledges that we are getting through our five senses, right? So it will get blended. So fancy will get blended or mixed with, and also fancy will get modified by the empirical phenomenon of the will. Will means our own will, which we express by the word choice. As fancy will get modified and blended with empirical phenomena or empirical knowledge of our mind or will, and that fancy will get expressed through our choices of words. So as we talk, as we write, we'll express those fanciful things. Okay. So Coleridge disagrees with Wordsworth's idea of poetic diction, that the proper language of poetry is a selection of the language spoken by men. Coleridge disagrees with Wordsworth's idea of poetic diction, that the proper language of poetry is a selection of the language spoken by men. So this is the first idea that Wordsworth speaks in the first part of Lyrical Ballads about the language of poetry, subject matter and the language of poetry. So he says that humble and simple and rustic language should be used in order to compose poetry. But here Coleridge is not fully agreeing with this idea. That he says that you need to choose a correct and more suitable language in order to write poetry, not like what Wordsworth is saying that you have to use the purified version of rustic language. So if you are, rustic language is in rustic language you will have many colloquial words and colloquial expression. That's what makes it a kind of rustic language. So if you are using the purified version, how come this can be a rustic language? And Wordsworth himself has not used the same rustic language that he is referring to in the preface. He has not used it in his poetry, that we could see in Lyrical Ballads itself. He has used somewhat an elevated kind of language which is not a rustic language. So he disagrees with Wordsworth in here, and he also refutes Wordsworth's opinion that there is no essential differences between prose and metrical composition. So you have to remember at what points that Coleridge disagrees with Wordsworth. Okay, so Wordsworth in the second part of the Lyrical Ballads, preface to Lyrical Ballads, he says that there is neither nor can be any essential difference between prose and metrical composition. So he says that is not possible. So poetry is a peculiar kind of composition in which we are using meter and rhythm and many more figure of speeches and all, and prose is something which is entirely different. There will be scientific prose, literary prose, and scientific prose, their primary aim is not to serve pleasure but imparting knowledge. So but poetry, we can see that pleasure is the prime motive or prime aim of creating poetry rather than instruction. Okay, so he also asks here that if I give you a prose work, so let me take a prose work and add some meter and rhyme to this prose work, whether the prose composition and the metrical composition will be the same? No, it won't serve the same thing even if you add meter and rhyme to prose work. But poetry is different, prose work is different. There is essential difference between them. So here also Coleridge actually deviates and refutes Wordsworth's idea of no essential difference between prose and metrical composition. And now Coleridge says that a poem is distinguished by meter and rhyme, meter and rhythm. Its immediate object is to provide pleasure and not to communicate the truth. So prose, what is the immediate aim of a prose? To communicate the truth, impart knowledge, not to please. But the immediate object of poetry is to please. After that only comes imparting knowledge on truth or universal kind of truth and all. So poetry and prose both are entirely different, because poem is distinguished from prose for its meter and rhyme and rhythm content. So you cannot make a prose equivalent to poetry just adding meter and rhyme to prose, because poetry is much more than that. So a poem is that species of composition which is opposed to the work of science, providing for its immediate object pleasure, not truth. So this I have already discussed. And a poem has organic unity. So prose also has organic unity, but more than prose, a poem has organic unity. It has a concentrated feeling and it has a pleasure element associated to it. Okay, each part of the poem should carry the reader pleasurably on to the next. So there is an internal connection link between the parts of the poem. That's what we are using the word organic unity. So each part of the poem, how lengthy even though this poem, each part of the poem should carry the reader's soul to another level, to the next level, or to the next part of the poem in a pleasurable manner. Okay, no poem can always be poetical, but all the parts contribute at least partly to the other. Every other poem that we can find, they are not blazing with poetical contents. It's not that every part of a poem it will be blazing and sparkling with this meter, rhythm and all sort of poetical qualities, but every other part of the poem will contribute something or at least partly to the other part of the poems, other parts of the poem. Okay, so that's the idea that he gives when he discusses about Wordsworth's idea of no essential difference between prose and metrical composition. Okay, Moving on, poetry reveals itself in the balance or reconciliation of opposites or discordant qualities, subordinating art to nature and the manner to the matter. So, how poetry reveals itself? By giving a balance and reconciliation between the opposites. Okay, there will be opposite things discussed in the same work, and and these qualities, and it is also always a subordinating art to nature. That means we will reflect nature in poetry and the manner to the matter. So in that way, poetry reveals itself in the balance or reconciliation of opposite. And good sense is the body of poetic genius. So he emphasizes towards the end, he says that good sense is the body of poetic genius. You have to understand here that what is more important in poetic, in order to create a poetry. Good sense is the major one. So good sense is the body of poetic genius. Fancy is drapery, motion its life, and imagination the soul. So he refers imagination as the soul of the poetry, while fancy is drapery and motion is life. Motion is its life, and good sense is the body. So you imagine a poetry as a human being. Then good sense is the body, which is most important, right? Body of that poetic genius, and fancy is its drapery, and motion is its life, and imagination is the soul. So good sense and imagination, these two things are the most, and also motion and fancy, these things are the most important things in poetical genius or in a poetry. Now let's see, in chapter 22 specifically, he has referred some defects and appreciation of Wordsworth works. One by one, let's see all of them. He has came up with 5 defects of Wordsworth. Okay, I'll tell each one of them, so don't skip the video. The video has yet to end. So the first defect that is told by Coleridge in here is that the first characteristic, though occasional, defect in the poem of Wordsworth is inconsistency of style. So what is the first defect of Wordsworth according to Coleridge as a poet? It's inconsistency of styles. His style is not uniformly excellent. We cannot find that even though he is telling about poetic style, the language, the style of the language used in the poetry, it is not like that his poetry is excellent uniformly throughout. So that is the first defect of Wordsworth as told by Coleridge. The second defect may be called a matter of factness in certain poems. There is a kind of laborious minuteness and fidelity in the representation of objects and their position as they appear to the poet himself. So he says that his facts, his ideas are not placed in a smooth manner. There is a matter of factness in certain poems. Matter of factness, you have to exactly write that phrase, matter of factness. So that is a second defect of Wordsworth as a poet that he makes in his poetry according to Coleridge. So what is the third defect of Wordsworth poetry? This is the excessive fondness for the dramatic form in certain poems. So he actually acts like a person who has great fondness for dramatic forms in certain poems by Wordsworth. So that is his third defect by as told by Coleridge. The fourth defect is closely connected with the third. In third defect, what was the third defect? Excessive fondness for dramatic form in certain poems. And the fourth defect is closely connected with the third. It arises from certain mannerisms produced by an intensity of feeling disproportionate to the common knowledge and value of the objects and characters described. So since he has a tendency towards dramatic forms in certain of his poems, actually this tendency arises from certain mannerisms produced by the intensity of feeling. So because of this dramatic fondness, there will be some intensity of feelings arised which are disappropriate or disproportionate to the common knowledge, and which are not suitable to the common knowledge and value of the object and characters described. So whenever you are describing a character and object, if you are instilling too much intensity of feeling and that will create a kind of disappropriation or disproportionate disproportionate value which are not common to common knowledge. So that is the fourth defect. The third and the last defect consists in the use of thoughts and images too great for the subject which has called them forth. So he sometimes uses some thoughts and images which are so great for the subject matter that he is talking. See, suppose he is talking about a humble thing and he will present a thought and image in the poetry which is not suitable to the situation. That kind of defects, that kind of situations we can find in Wordsworth poetry according to Coleridge. So these are the 5 major defects according to Coleridge that we can find in Wordsworth poetry. The first one is, what is the first defect? Inconsistency of style. Second one is matter of factness. Third one is fondness for the dramatic form in certain poems. The fourth one is the intensity of feeling disproportionate to the common knowledge and value of the object and character described. And the fifth one is thoughts and images, usage of thoughts and images too great for the subject which has called them forth. So these are the defects, 5 defects that Coleridge finds about Wordsworth poetry. And now he, after citing the defects, he now tells about the excellences of Wordsworth poetry. He has given actually 6 excellent characteristics of Wordsworth poetry. The first excellence of Wordsworth is that, in the words of Coleridge, I am telling exact words by Coleridge, is an austere purity of language, both grammatically and logically. In short, a perfect appropriateness of words to meaning. So it's like he has used a kind of pure language in the poetry. That means that a perfect appropriateness word to meaning. So what exactly he wanted to mean in that situation, he uses exactly that diction, that word in that situation of the poetry. So that is one of the purity of language, or grammatically and logically it is so clear and it is so perfect and appropriate as word to meaning. So that is the first excellence of Wordsworth. The second one is, the next excellence of Wordsworth is the sanity and soundness of thoughts and sentiments. So we can find a very clear sanity and soundness, very clear and loud in the sense, there is no confusion, sound thoughts and sentiments. So that is the second excellence of Wordsworth poetry according to Coleridge. The third one is that one in which he far surpasses Daniel. So he has a very good strength and originality in his single line. So the third excellence of Wordsworth is that his single originality and strength in lines, even in single lines and in single paragraph, you can see this originality and strength which is of par excellence. And the fourth excellent character of Wordsworth poetry is the perfect truth to nature in his images and descriptions. So while he was describing and giving images, he is perfectly in truth with nature. That is the fourth characteristic, virtue of Wordsworth poetry. The fifth one is that the sympathetic thing, and the union of deep and subtle thought with sensibility. So he is presenting his feelings, his deep thoughts and subtle thoughts with in a sensible manner, and he is presenting sympathy towards people, sympathy towards mankind, rather than a fellow sufferer. He is presenting all this sympathy as a contemplator who is thinking about other people's sufferings rather than a fellow sufferer. He is not rather empathetic but rather sympathetic. Lastly, the last excellent virtue of Wordsworth has the gift of imagination in the highest sense of the word. So what highest sense you can give to the word imagination? So he has talked about imagination. So Wordsworth possesses a kind of excellent imagination in his poetic career. So these are the 6 major qualities of Wordsworth poetry. First one is purity of language, and the second one is his sanity and soundness of thought and sentiments, and the third one is a kind of originality and strength in single lines and paragraphs while he was composing. The fourth characteristic is Wordsworth's perfect truth to nature in his presentation of images and descriptions. And the fifth one is that his presentation of pathos, that means sympathy, with a deep, subtle thought with sensibility, in a way that he is sympathetic to men as a contemplator, not as a fellow sufferer. The last excellent quality of Wordsworth poetry is the gift of imagination that Wordsworth has in the highest sense of the word. That what kind of highest meaning that you can give to imagination, that is there in Wordsworth poetry. So these are the major excellences or virtues of Wordsworth poetry. As a poetical person, Coleridge can see in Wordsworth. So I hope the last session I have not given as a slide, but still I hope this was clear. So please remember the major defect cited by Coleridge in Wordsworth poetry, as well as major excellent virtues of Wordsworth as mentioned by Coleridge in Biographia Literaria. So I hope this whole video was clear to you. If not, watch it twice, or you can directly ask me in this number through WhatsApp or messaging or by calling. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram if you are also there in Instagram. My ID is right here. See, I'm sharing a lot of free materials. Save them into your account so that you can have them whenever necessary. And also visit my website www.highpoint.in. Every other detail you can find in Highpoint, my website, because you can have the free trial there. And after that, if you are interested, you can join the group, join the class, join the courses from there, and be a part of our family and have the 2 bonuses after joining it, because a 15% of off is going on. Don't lose it, grab it now, and don't waste your time by waiting for the next NTA UGC NET exam schedule to come out and the notification to come out. Start studying early, be the early bird, and revise your study materials as many as possible, and be thorough with the study materials, and be at most prepared for the next exam if you are determined to have your UGC NET in 2022. So thank you for listening to this video. If you have not yet subscribed to my channel here, subscribe to it and press the bell icon too, so that I don't want you to miss any of the updations that we are making here. So that's all about it. Meet you in the next video session. Until then, bye bye.